Hello, and welcome back from your extended spring break. In light of the cancellations due to the coronavirus, we're going to be meeting together in this environment for the next couple weeks and for the foreseeable future. Okay, so today should be March 26th, 2020. We're going to be talking about the basic online procedures. I'm going to be introducing those online procedures to you today. We're going to run over the top of the week announcements like we normally would in a normal day of school. We're going to talk through your review guide for your Unit 5 test, which is coming up at the end of next week. So I'll have a little bit of time to ramp up on Thursday and Friday, make sure that everyone's on the same page with this online stuff, and then by the end of next week we're going to be taking the Unit 5 test because we're at the end of the unit, Unit 5, and then at the end of class day we're going to begin OTN 6, looking specifically at an SQ3R for Wordsworth's poem, The Solitary Reaper. This is one of the poems that might show up on your upcoming test, so it's valuable for you to pay close attention to the introductory portions of the lecture about that text. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. All right, it's upside down. So again, to reiterate, it should be March 26th. If you're watching this on a day other than March 26th, then you're either ahead or you're behind, okay? There are three core pillars of the online portion of the course that you're going to have to adapt to, okay? So first pillar is YouTube, okay? So we're going to be communicating each other, primarily me to you, through these YouTube lectures, all right? Number two, you need to have access to RenWeb, all right? So whatever you have to do, okay, whoever you have to call the president if you need to, but you need access to RenWeb over the next few weeks. And number three, the last thing that you need to have ready access to on a daily basis is email, okay? If that's one of your parents' emails, that's fine. If it's your own personal email, that's also fine, but you need ready access to an email over the next few weeks during the extended cancellation. So let's talk about how the online class is going to proceed, the procedures that we are going to follow, okay? In terms of attendance, still have to take attendance on a daily basis. So I will be looking at the comment section of the video lectures that are posted online. These video lectures will be around 25 to 20 minutes, probably 30 at the longest. Today's might be 30 because we have to go through all these announcements. I'm going to be looking at the comment section. You leave a comment for the lecture on the day that it's assigned. The comment needs to come in by 3 p.m. When you're done watching the video, all you got to do is post that comment. It doesn't have to be fancy, just, hey, I was here. Of course, you can give a glowing review of the amazing online lecture and how great the videography was or whatever. But basically, all you need to do is say that you were there. I'll mark you present for the day. That's how attendance works. What about reading checks? We're still going to have reading checks. You're going to send me an email on the day of the reading's due date. Okay, so like for instance, this Monday, you have Samuel Taylor Coleridge reading that is going to be due. You need to send me an email by Monday at 3 p.m. indicating the percentage of the reading that you've completed. So really simple, Mr. Dale, hey, I completed 100% of Samuel Taylor Coleridge reading, okay? OTN procedure. We're still going to be completing OTNs. Your job at home is to make sure that your OTNs are getting done. They, just like normal, need to be done as we complete them in class, okay? So if we completed an OTN, say, in class on Friday, then I could check that OTN on Monday, all right? You would need to send me an email by 3 p.m. of the OTN's due date indicating that you had completed it, okay? If you do not do so, then it would be late. If you give me an email late, I'll give you a standard late grade. If it's too late, it turns into a 0, just like normal, okay? If I needed a copy of your actual work, then you could email me an attachment, all right? So you might want to, you could send in pictures of handwritten work if you wanted to, or you could type it and send it in as a Google document or as a Word document, whichever suits you best, or as a PDF. All right, what about major assignments, okay? We're still going to be doing tests and we're still going to be writing essays, all right? So, but we're going to do modified versions of those assignments in light of the fact that these are kind of uncertain times and we're all adjusting to new things. Now, don't use COVID-19 as an excuse to not be a faithful and good student. We are having class, and people are working hard in order to make school available to you during this strange time. But I also understand that this is not a normal time for families, for individuals, for students like you. This is just a strange time. So we're going to modify these assignments and walk the line between being faithful and also being reasonable. Okay, so let's make sure that we're doing that together. Okay, your first major assignment is going to be your Unit 5 test, which is going to happen at the end of this coming week. We'll talk more about that in the middle of class. All right, now what's coming down the pipe this next week for you? Well, first you need to send me an email by Monday at 3 p.m. indicating the percentage of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's work that you've read. All right, so your email can be as simple as, hello, Mr. Dale, I read 100% of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poetry. Have a great day, or whatever, okay? But by Monday at 3 p.m., I need to have an email in my inbox from you that indicates how much of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poetry that you have read. Vocabulary and grammar quizzes are temporarily suspended, okay? So that might be good news for some of you, but it's bad news for those of you who really need grammar instruction, who need that weekly grammar work. So if that's you and you really want to improve on your grammar, I recommend to you Khan Academy's online grammar course. It's actually quite helpful. And it's easy to navigate and easy to use. So use some of your quarantine downtime to improve your grammar on Khan Academy. I highly recommend that to you, okay? Now, you don't have any new reading for this week. So for Thursday, Friday, and then next week, you don't have any new reading to complete, but you will have some OTNs that you need to be getting done. OTN 6, which we're going to start today and finish in class on Friday. And then also we're going to be doing an OTN on Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem Kubla Khan. After those on-the-record notes are complete, we're going to be moving on to studying for and preparing for your test, finishing your sonnet, and getting ready to take that test by the end of next week, okay? So in terms of ongoing assignments that you need to have, that you need to be developing, obviously you need to continue drafting your sonnet and you need to begin preparing for your Unit 5 test. How can you begin preparing for this test? Let's talk about it with using the Unit 5 review guide, okay? So this review guide is attached on RenWeb. If you want to hit pause really quick and go print out yourself a copy of the review guide, then you absolutely can do that, or you can just follow along with what I'm showing you on the document camera, or you could pull it up on your computer. Any of those things work fine for me. Let me refocus the camera since I've brought this a little bit closer to your eye. All right, and let's take a look at what the Unit 5 test is going to be composed of. Okay, the first portion of your test is going to be 50% of the test is your grade on your Italian sonnet. Okay, the sonnet hasn't gone away. It's some of you have worked very hard on this. It's still going to be evaluated. I'm still going to collect it at the end of the week next week. It's going to be graded according to these categories: form and meaning and clarity. All right, so your form score is going to come from your adherence to the rhyme scheme, right? ABBA, ABBA, CDC, CDC, or CDE, CDE, that is conventional in Italian sonnet. Okay, your following of the conventions of meter for an Italian sonnet, which is iambic pentameter, and your following of the structure for an Italian sonnet: octet, volta, which is a turning, and then a sestet. Remember what your octet is supposed to do. It's supposed to raise a question or concern. The volta shifts the tone, and the sestet resolves or answers the question and the concern. Okay, so the other portion of your grade will come from just the meaning and clarity of your poem. So have you written clearly? Is your language carefully structured grammatically? Are your sentences coherent? You can't, just because you're writing a poem, suddenly drift into like incoherent words. And I would highly recommend avoiding really flowery or strange language. You can use figures of speech, you can use imagery, you can use allusion, you can use all of these various poetic devices, but don't say doth and thee and thou. Nobody talks that way. So write in words that you typically would use. And you can elevate your diction, right? But just use the precise, exact words, okay? So sometimes students turn me in things and they're trying to sound like Shakespeare, and really they're just a 15-year-old who lives in 2020, okay? So write like a 15-year-old who lives in 2020, who's thinking about something deep, meditating on it, and writing something clear, okay? And finally, you need to have a clear subject and a theme, all right? You need to write about something clear. That's your subject, right? Whether it be your childhood or your favorite sport, or some kind of feeling or experience you've had before. And then you need to develop some kind of thematic impression about that subject. So what are you going to say about the nature of childhood, or your own childhood, or your own emotional experiences, or your own sort of philosophical reflections or theological reflections on who God is, or who you are, or what it means to be what you are, right? So your subject and theme need to be clear, okay? So this is how you will be graded for your sonnet. Now, the second portion of the test is going to require you to analyze one of these poems, okay? There are 6 on the list: The Tiger, The Sick Rose, The World is Too Much With Us, Composed Upon Westminster Bridge, Solitary Reaper, and Kubla Khan. All right, if you're in regular, you choose one poem, and that will be the poem that you write your explication about, so you can prepare for that one poem. No other poems you don't have to worry about. It cuts down your preparation load by 5/6. You only have to prepare for one. If you're in honors, I'm going to choose for you, so you need to be adaptable. You need to be ready to write about any of these 6 poems that you are asked to write about. So that's going to extend your preparation and also extend the rigor of the test for you in particular, okay? So in order to make the test more manageable, I've shortened the length of the test because we have this sort of strange situation that we're in. All right, so I've cut down the amount of textual examples that you need to analyze. You need to locate 2 to 3. All right, that means if 2 is appropriate, you can go for 2. If 3 is appropriate, you should go for 3, whatever's appropriate. But you need to find 2 to 3 rhythm and sound observations that you're going to make about how the way the poem is metered, the rhythm of the poem, and the sounds of the words, whether it be rhyme or other sonic devices like alliteration, assonance, cacophony, euphony, all right? How the sounds and the rhythm of the poem develop the meaning of the poem, okay? So you're not just pointing out, hey, Wordsworth used an iamb here, nice, or this was a trochaic substitution. You have to connect those sounds to the sense, the meaning of the poem, okay? So 2 to 3 examples of that. 2 to 3 examples of the word choice, whether those word choice allude to things or just the relationship between what the words mean and what the words associatively mean, or what meanings are suggested by the word choices. Maybe there's juxtaposition in the word choices. Maybe there's concrete imagery in the language. All right, let's move this down a little bit. I'm sorry. So diction. Also imagery you can analyze, and then figurative language you can analyze. Okay, and you need to find, once again, 2 to 3 keen observations of how the meanings of the poem, of the word choice, the words used, whether it just be individual words or images or figures of speech, how those are developing the meaning of the poem as well. Okay, so these 2 things will work in correspondence to lead to your interpretive observations about the voice of the poem. Okay, the voice of the poem. Now let's flip that page. The symbols developed in the poem, and then the overarching theme of the poem. Okay, so in other words, exactly like the OTNs that we've been conducting throughout the course of the class, you are going to start by looking at the details, the word choice, the rhythm, the structures used in the poem, and how those word choices, structures, rhythms, rhyme schemes, whatever, you name it, develop the perspective of the person who is speaking the poem. We call that person the voice or the speaker. And how those poetic devices develop the symbols of the poem. And eventually, right, at the very bottom, how those develop the theme or main idea of the poem, okay? So that is the purpose of your test, is to establish a reasonable reading of the poem's main idea or theme using a specific analysis of the details of the text, okay? So that is what I will be evaluating over the next, at the end of next week on your Unit 5 test, okay? Sounds good. So let's move on to looking at OTN 6, which is about Wordsworth's poem, The Solitary Reaper. Okay, so we are going to be working on OTN 6 today in the second half of this class, which class is going to be around 25 minutes long per day. You might have to spot me a few minutes here or there, and you might get out early. But it's normally going to be around 25 minutes. And we're going to be doing the first half of this OTN today. We're going to be conducting an SQ3R. Tomorrow we'll be finishing our analysis of the Solitary Reaper, drawing some interpretive conclusions about the meaning of the poem as a whole. So in other words, exactly like what you're having to do on your poetic explication is what we're going to be doing in these OTNs. And that's what we've been doing all unit long, okay? So let's get into the poem, The Solitary Reaper. All right, so for my OTN 6, as usual, okay, let's zoom in just a bit. As usual, for my OTNs, we're going to start with an SQ3R. Now, SQ3R is just a strategy that we use to understand the literal meaning of any kind of text or work of writing that we are studying in general in school. It's always a good idea to have a surveillance, a main idea of what, a question that gets you to the main idea of what you're reading, and then you want to read, recite, and then review basically what you have read. So this is a great reading comprehension strategy that we follow on a daily basis in this class, okay? So let's go ahead and in your notes label this section 1, and let's jump into our SQ3R for the poem. All right? Well, as always, sorry, these notes are pretty small, so I'll zoom in as best I can and kind of move this around as we go. But the first thing that we want to pay attention to in an SQ3R is who the speaker is. Who is speaking? So the speaker of the poem is simply an English traveler who is visiting the Scottish Highlands. Okay, now for contemporary Americans, we don't really understand the cultural distinctions between English and Scottish, but obviously the Scottish Highlands, which is a distinct location from the Scottish lowlands, is a place that was on the margins of European culture. So basically England, especially during the 1800s in which this poem was written, England, and specifically London, was a cultural center of sophisticated European culture. So art, philosophy, academia, all centered in places like London. So this is an English traveler who is in the Scottish Highlands. The Scottish Highlands were on the margins of that cultural sophistication. So you can think of the Scottish Highlands as like a backwater, redneck is not exactly the right word for it, but much more rural, much more agrarian, off the beaten path of sophisticated English culture. And this English traveler is up in the Scottish Highlands, and he, after visiting this place, is reflecting on a particularly moving memory from his journey, okay, in which he was exposed to the Solitary Reaper's song. Okay, the second thing we want to pay attention to in our SQ3R is the genre and the form of the poem. The poem, to put it simply, is a lyric poem, which means it's just a meditation on something significant that happened in the speaker's life. Okay, the form of the poem is basically as follows. It's written in iambic tetrameter, which means that there are 8 syllables per line. Okay, and they are written in rising fashion. So da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. That's what we call an I am, I am, I am. Okay, and the poem's structure is divided into 4 stanzas of 8 lines each, okay? 4 stanzas of 8 lines each, which we would call octets in poetic speech. And each octet is subdivided into quatrains, 2 quatrains, right? So the 8-line stanzas are divided into 4-line quatrains. The first 4 lines of the poem rhyme alternatively, and the second 4 lines of the poem are structured as couplets. So in other words, if it goes like this: A, B, rhyming alternatively, C, C, couplet, D, D, couplet. All right, so this is a pattern, a formal pattern that Wordsworth structures for himself for this particular poem. So it's not like a sonnet where it's a conventional form. This is a form that Wordsworth has decided on for himself. Okay? Now, we also want to pay attention to the title of the text. Now, the title of the text is 3 words. Okay, it is the solitary reaper. Now, the first 2 words, the and solitary, okay, emphasize the singularity, the individuality of the reaper. The reaper is the central subject, the central figure in the poem. So that's just a definite article that emphasizes the singularity of a thing, okay, of whatever noun it's modifying, the tiger, the coffee cup. It distinguishes, it emphasizes the individuality of the thing that it's modifying. Same with the word solitary. Solitary is a word that just emphasizes or describes something that exists or works alone, right? So like the definite article, the second word of the title just once again emphasizes the singularity, the individuality of the poem's central subject. So Wordsworth in his title is once again emphasizing something about the nature of the reaper, who is the central figure of the poem, that she is alone, she is distinguished, she is individual. Okay? Now, the word reaper, on a just very basic level, a reaper is someone who harvests a crop. This particular reaper is harvesting grain. That's a staple crop needed to sustain the lives of people in one's community. Unless you're me and you're gluten-free and you can't have grain, but we get the metaphor that it's daily bread. All right, staple crop, continual sustenance. So she's a peasant. She's from the working class. All right, that's an important thing to recognize. She's not like an aristocratic or high-class woman, but she's just a working-class peasant farmer. She makes her living from being what we call a field hand. Okay. Second thing we want to notice is that the word reaper, beyond just its literal meaning that she's out in the field collecting grain, it carries with it some poetic connotations, right? So on the one hand, a reaper is someone who sort of who brings life to her community by reaping a harvest. And a harvest time is traditionally associated with a period of thanksgiving and plenty. Okay, so during harvest times, there's oftentimes festivals. We have fall festivals in our culture and Thanksgiving in our culture that come around the autumn months in which the harvest would be collected. There's lots of religious traditions that center around the harvest that point to the god, or in pagan cultures, the gods' continued sustenance of the people that look to them for protection. So it's this process of reaping a natural bounty, of collecting something, of bringing life to your community. But it's also, alternatively, the word reaper is associated with the folk figure, the Grim Reaper, who made a kind of appearance in European culture in the 1300s during the bubonic plague and the Black Death. Okay, much worse than coronavirus, I assure you, hopefully. Okay, so the Grim Reaper was one who harvested human souls, ushering them into the afterlife. So in this sense, reaping is something that is sort of organically connected. The word reaping is organically connected to cycles of life and death. Its connotations carries with it both sort of associations of life, someone who brings life to their community, even as they cut down living stalks of grain, halting their growth for the preservation of others, of their community. Okay, so In other words, reaping is something that is sort of sublime, right? It's this sort of sublime tension in the natural world that fascinated Wordsworth and fascinated the Romantics, okay? So the solitary reaper is this kind of sublime figure who is individual. She's set apart, okay? Lastly, the reaper, the primary thing that the reaper is doing is she's doing kind of two things. She's working and she's singing, okay? So she's doing her job and she's singing. In this way, she's a kind of artist, right? An artist from the non-aristocratic working class, okay? So what the poem is going to embody, in light of all of these associations, is Wordsworth's personal theory of beauty. Now, this is a philosophical area of study called aesthetics, which is the study of what beauty is, what constitutes beauty, right? Beauty is a kind of human concept. It's an abstraction. It's a word that we assign to things that we value deeply and believe to be worthy of our adoration, okay? But again, what constitutes beauty, that is something that requires a little bit of careful thought, right? What exactly do we call beautiful? This is Wordsworth's sort of personal theory of the essence, the nature of unmitigated beauty. The solitary reaper becomes a symbol of his own understanding from the Romantic worldview of what beauty is, right? He's going to meditate on it. He's going to attempt to put it into words. All right? So what is the central question that's going to animate our entire analysis of this poem that we're going to get into tomorrow? It is essentially, how does the speaker's poetic style, in other words, how do the details of what the poem, of how the poem's actually constructed, the words, the images, the rhyme scheme, the formal structures, everything, how does the speaker's poetic style develop the symbolic significance of the solitary reaper? Well, we've already established that she's a sort of articulation of Wordsworth's theory of beauty, but that just raises a question, right? What is his theory of beauty? What is he saying is beautiful? Okay, so let's go ahead and read the poem quickly and try and just understand on a literal level. We're not going to answer this big thematic question yet, but we're just going to try and understand in our last 3 minutes what the poem actually says. Okay, so the poem is titled The Solitary Reaper. Okay, so Wordsworth begins. Behold her, single in the field. So it's a command. Behold her, look at her. Single in the field, yon solitary Highland lass. It just means that she's from Scotland and she's alone. Reaping and singing by herself. So she's hard at work reaping and she's singing a song. Stop here or gently pass. Another command. You can stop or you can move on, but you need to do so gently, he says. Alone she cuts and binds the grain and sings a melancholy strain. Oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. So she's working alone, she's cutting down the grain, she's binding it in bundles, she's singing a melancholy strain, a sad tune, and it's filling up the valley and overflowing to the hill that the speaker is looking down on her from. The speaker continues, no nightingale did ever chaunt more welcome notes to weary bands of travelers in some shady haunt among Arabian sands. In other words, he compares the song to a nightingale song, saying that the nightingale, a European bird famous for its beautiful singing, specifically in the nighttime hours, did ever sing a prettier song to tired travelers moving through Arabian sands, okay? A voice so thrilling ne'er was heard in springtime from the cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas among the farthest Hebrides. So again, another sort of parallel image comparing the speaker, comparing the solitary reaper's song to another songbird, breaking the silence of another pretty desolate kind of location, the Hebrides. These are islands off the coast of Scotland. Speaker then goes on to ask a question. Will no one tell me what she sings? Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow for old, unhappy, far-off things and battles long ago. Okay, he wants to know what she's singing about, and he says basically, perhaps the sad song is for like a long, old battle that she had no part in, and it's just a traditional song that's been handed down to her. And then he sort of corrects himself, or maybe it's some more humble lay. Humble just meaning smaller, less sort of grand or epic. Familiar matter of today, some natural sorrow, loss, or pain that has been and may be again. He ends with a question. The next stanza begins. Whatever the theme, whatever the main idea, whatever the meaning of the song that the maiden sang, as if her song could have no ending, I saw her singing at her work, and o'er the sickle bending. I listened, motionless and still. And as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore, long after it was heard no more. So by the end of the poem, the speaker wants to know what the reaper is singing about, what the words mean. The answer to that question is not given to him. He makes peace with that fact and he moves on. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to be analyzing the poem in a lot more detail, looking at how this poem, how this experience of the speaker coming into contact with the Solitary Reaper's song develops Wordsworth's distinctly romantic theory of beauty, his distinctly romantic understanding of aesthetics. All right, so we're going to answer that question tomorrow. Hope you guys have a great day.